morning. This is our webinar, Tactical Approaches to Law Enforcement Challenges. As everybody's probably very aware, law enforcement does have some unique risks, specifically with the legal environment in today's world. So hopefully we can shed some light on different scenarios and how to approach those scenarios, and let it be educational. If you have questions, there is a Q&A button down in the bottom left-hand corner. Just throw some questions in there. I'll be monitoring that. And then, whenever we get a break or where it comes to a stopping point, happy to ask your questions. Make this as interactive as you can. It's always more, everybody always gets more out of these types of things the more questions you ask, instead of just letting us sit here and talk to you about these types of things. So my name is Nathaniel Johnson. I work for Granite Insurance Agency. We're based out of Granite Falls. And our agency works with several different municipalities in the area, and have worked with several for quite a while. So just looking to expand on that and share our expertise. And with that, Tony McCroskey, who is one of my co-workers, he's been working in the municipality space for quite a while, Tony. So
15 years.
Yeah. So he has plenty of experience to kind of go around and share with everybody. But our star of the webinar here is Ashley Barnett. So Ashley is a senior risk consultant for Trident Public Risk Solutions. Trident, they specialize in property and casualty insurance products, and service tailored to the needs of public entities, or services tailored needs to the public entities. She's got 38 years of safety and risk management experience.
Started when I was 2.
What's that, Ashley?
I got started when I was 2.
Yeah, that's right. She's also very active in national and state PREEM organizations. She's a very regular speaker there, so highly regarded within those organizations. She specializes in law enforcement, jails, and employment practices. She's been in more jails than most sheriffs, or she claims to have been, but as a professional, not as a detainee. So having a wide range of experience actually brings a unique perspective to public entities, providing them with a valuable resource for their concerns and implementation of sustainable business practices, working to prevent incidents, claims, and building programs with strong legal defense. So Ashley is our star of the webinar. She'll be the one to share all of the information with you guys. And like I said, when you have questions, just pop them in the Q&A, and then we'll talk about those. But Ashley, I'll let you take it from here.
All right. Thank you very much. Let me screen up here. Okay. All right. Oh, no green line on it. Hold on a second. We had this, and now we don't. I put the wrong screen up. I don't know what it's sharing. Are you seeing just a regular screen?
No, I see the PowerPoint or the presentation.
Okay, good. All righty then. So with this presentation, I am coming at this from an insurance and liability standpoint. So, what we're trying to do here is prevent claims and incidents from happening, stay off, local news, and should things go sideways, you have good practices and documentation, policies and procedures, SOPs for us to for good. Sorry, this kind of got jacked up here. So that you can be well represented in court or proceedings leading up to that. So with that, let's talk about, drill down into what this is going to cover. So I want to talk about what's going on, not only on a national basis, but bring it home to North Carolina, what's going on in our own state here, the top claims that everybody is experiencing, certainly, our experience as well and what we're seeing there, and then what we can do about it. And here's some of the hot buttons: vehicle pursuit and auto liability. That's a real big one, especially with underwriters right now. So I'm take a deeper dive into that with you all. Supervision and accountability seems to be a real root of a lot of challenges that are going on with law enforcement today. I also want to talk about body and dash cameras and things to consider, and especially data storage and IT. We think we get some great folks in place to do stuff, but they may not have the talent that's needed. There's all other kinds of things to consider as well that we want to talk about. An active shooter, that in itself is something that we could spend all day on. So that's why I've got a specific handout just for that, and then run over the highlights so that you've got everything you need in that one resource. So with that, let's talk about the national statistics. All right, so we've got a lot going on here. Over about 18,000 agencies across the country. Um, you know, Hundreds of thousands of sworn law enforcement officers. But let's get down into what's going on here. Oops, so sorry. So with all of this, 1% of these officers are charged with committing misconduct. And in this, if you unpack that, we've got excessive use of force, which is number one, sexual misconduct, then comes theft, false arrest, and then one of the worst ones you've got to deal with when you have to deal with defense in court or lawsuits, the deliberate indifference to serious harm and medical needs, harm to a person in custody, neglecting them. And those are some of the biggest claims that we get as well. So let's bring this home and look at North Carolina and what's actually going on here. So there's 504 agencies, which is a lot in the state. And we've got 23,000 sworn officers. But let's take a look at what's going on in our communities. So we've got top crimes are robbery, assault, and burglary. And these things are increasing at this point because, times are harder on folks. So, desperate folks in desperate times do stuff. And so, as these crimes are getting committed, we're having to respond to these and deal with them, which again, increases statistics, the likelihood of things going wrong, going sideways. So your homicide rate, you've got 10 per 100,000 people. That was 2021. That's the most recent statistic available. But yeah, let's take a look at the violent crimes. Look at this 45,000 plus violent crimes. That's 1 in 232 people are experiencing a violent crime. That's a lot. If you think about, your own neighborhood, you've got 232 people or even more in your own neighborhood, and at least one of those persons, if people are experiencing a violent crime, that's a lot of folks. And property crimes, 1 in 45. Folks are getting brave today, committing crimes just during daylight, where that didn't used to happen because everybody was at work. Well, now, they're coming in people's homes while people are still there. And so the crime rate, 26% per 1,000 resident. Here's another shocker to me and I would have never thought this. I've been traveling through North Carolina forever for work and have always felt safe. But this kind of struck me between the eyes. It's the 36th safest state in the country as ranked by the FBI for 2021. 36. That's like less than half. You're at, the lowest percentile of folks, states that are safe. And I was really shocked by that. And they're giving the state an overall C minus, which also is a shock because all the states around it have a much better grade received by the FBI. So that was just really, really interesting to me and also alarming. So here's some more factoids. So look at the number of arrests. There are over 2.5 million arrests between 2013 and 2021. Of those, 114, about 115,000 in 2021. And then killings by police, 411, that's actually a lot. But this also, if you put it in buckets, we've got things that fall into this category, such as, suicide by cop. You have what, self-defense situation where an officer, has to defend themselves against somebody pulling a weapon on them. And then, there's other situations that fall in that where you've got to stop somebody or, and then there's, the accidental shootings that are in that category as well. And then let's talk about this aspect too, the civilian complaints, because that also paints the picture of what's going on. So over 3,000 civilian complaints. And under this, 82% of those were upheld. That's actually a concern that 82% of over 3,000 complaints of misconduct had some kind of substance to them and merit. So, and then under that, we've got the excessive use of force complaints. Interestingly enough, on that one, only 8% of those are upheld. We see those a lot. In terms of the claims that come into us. And even though it may not be upheld, there's still duty to defend, which is expensive. So discrimination complaints, interestingly enough, 0 were upheld on that. But as I'll mention later on in this, the discrimination complaint numbers are increasing. That's just something to be aware of. Criminal misconduct complaints. Again, 5% of those were upheld. So, while there may be a lot of those complaints, not as many of them are true once they're investigated. Here's something that also had a toll on the North Carolina scorecard. North Carolina had 50% more fines and forfeitures taken from their own communities. So that's something to be aware of as well. So with that, all right, what are the top claims that are happening across the state? And guess what? Our own claims experience is matching up to this. So excessive use of force, that's the number one claim that we see. And even if you could prove that there was nothing wrong, there's still the cost of defending the claim. And these claims are not cheap. As attorneys charge a lot per hour. And, the quicker, of course, you get these things settled, the better. But sometimes they can drag on for years. And that takes up a lot of time and resources. And it also affects the morale in departments. So that's, something to be aware of as well. False arrest, people are going to claim that, all the time. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not true. You still have duty to defend on that. Civil rights claims, and that's that's the whole gamut between people not being happy that they're not being served certain things, at lunch or dinner, or they're getting served, stuff 3 times a day, like the corn dog sheriff in Alabama. So that's an interesting story if you ever want to look that one up. But these things do happen. Discrimination claims, again, being on the rise, and there's still duty to defend and investigations that have to happen even if the officer is exonerated. And again, this is something that does affect morale and the workplace culture. Auto losses is huge. North Carolina is, again, one of the top states with auto losses. And as we know, auto losses and auto premiums are hitting everybody hard, even your personal lines right now. And a lot of it comes from distracted driving. There's a lot in an officer's car, computer screens, cell phones, the radios, all of that. And plus, you're still trying to look around and see what's going on when you're on patrol. So we'll dig more into that in just a minute, too. So with all of that, there's a mindset to this as I speak with my law enforcement friends and we work on projects, but if it is predictable, it is preventable. Now, can it always be prevented? No, but it's all about awareness, right? So if we are aware of certain things, we can start working on them. If we know that we have trends within our own department, we can start to deal with that going, okay, well, what do we do to prevent this from happening? What do we do to stop the trend and turn it the other way? Whether you have committees, task force to work on these kinds of things. But yes, so all right, let's dig into excessive use of force.
Hey, Ashley, I have a quick question.
Yes, sure.
Have you seen the amount of claims, the dollar amount that's actually paid out increase over the past 10 years? What is the amount, the dollar amount that claims actually pay out? Has that been going up?
It has been going up because juries have changed, mindset has changed. What we're seeing in terms of, you know, what we see on TV has certainly changed the minds of jury, has affected, the way people feel, the desire to have punitive damages, placed on departments. And that has certainly caused, for a rise in the claims that we're seeing and resolutions. Hopefully, many of these things get resolved in mediation before they go to court. Some things do go through court, but even in mediation, we're seeing the prices and the costs go up because they know that if it goes to court, it's going to be a whole lot more. And plaintiffs' attorneys are, many times wanting something to go to court because they know that they're going to get the sympathy of a judge or a jury for their client. So, um, yes, I agree that it's definitely going up. So for excessive use of force under this brutality, serious injury, and death, that's what's happening here. There's unjustified shootings, accidental shootings, and then when we're restraining folks, we're not being as careful as we could with them. You have rapidly evolving situations, emotions can run high. Um, you know, we're not using verbal commands. So if we're not telling somebody what they need to do, how can they respond accordingly? Or maybe they have, arthritic problems and they can't get down on the ground, or maybe they have other things. There has to be communication for this. And there's several different things that we can do here. So, again, the use of force hierarchy, rely on that and what your training is on that. Are we training? Is our training effective? How often is it being done? What is the state requiring? Okay, well, the state requires 24 hours a year, and this is one of the things that is required in that. But are we training enough on it? Is there enough reminders? And is 24 hours a year enough in training? I hardly ever see a department do the minimum. Many officers I see will do 160, 200 plus hours a year training, and many do additional training on their own because they want to have their skill set as sharp as possible so that they make good split second decisions with what knowledge they have at the time. So making sure that we are responding with a reasonable amount of force. If we find that and we've got to be honest with ourselves when we're out there, and that's why we'll have the duty to intervene in our policies and procedures, which has been added now, and de-escalation. We're going to talk about that on the next slide. There's ways to restrain people without striking and injuring them unnecessarily. So with that, let's talk about asphyxia prevention. So we've heard, I can't breathe. Well, all right. And then one of the things that we have noticed is that many times you'll have a detainee in the back of a vehicle. And so when we put them in there sitting up, and they may be cuffed or what have you. But at a point, we see them starting to lie on their side. And what they're trying to do is breathe. It's the body's natural response to trying to, get into the prone position to get into better ability to breathe. Many times people think, oh, well, they're trying to escape, get out of their handcuffs, etc. But what it simply is that they're trying to get a good breath because they're worked up, they're stressed out, their body may be in shock. So, there's different things that we can do. There's the lateral recovery restraint system, which entails, once we cuff them, we roll them to the side at that point and just start it off. So, okay, they're on their side. We communicate with them. Hey, it's all going to be okay. Just breathe. We can even breathe with them. It's not a bad idea to de-escalate ourselves as well as that person at that time. And you can gently lay your hands on them, so it's like a couple of things that, yep, they may have done something wrong, but you know what? We're dealing with humans, and a lot can go wrong. We may have a really bad situation that we're dealing with, but it's how we handle it that can make all the difference. And, sometimes we've got to do it as a team and work with each other to remind each other, okay, we may have somebody who is more aggressive than they might need to be. And this is where we can have a situation like a pit crew chief. So, pit crew chief is typically the first person on the scene. That person is not at that point emotionally invested, so they can watch what's going on and take in that information and guide the crew as if things start going sideways to make sure that things stay on track, remind the staff involved of different things or suggest certain things, or be involved to make sure that, challenging actions, things with bad optics can be prevented. Um, so, we see a lot of legal challenges that have occurred across, the country with asphyxia. And so these are some things that we can do to prevent that. The other thing is to always check our SOPs. Take a look at these things on an annual basis, at least annually. The more volatile policies you're going to want to look at much more often. And we want to look at these things with a lot of things in mind, such as making sure that we prevent plaintiff traps. Our wording in our SOPs should be very careful, our word choices, watching for the absolute wording, such as each, all, should, every, shall, and make sure that if we do use those words, that we really want that word in there. We want to make sure that our SOPs are written with officer discretion in mind, but also knowing that if anything goes wrong and a claim is made, the first thing a plaintiff's attorney is going to do is request a copy of SOPs and take a look at that and see how they can be used against the department. And so we want to watch the word choices and anything that a plaintiff's attorney can try to hang the hat on and try to prove negligence against an agency. So under this asphyxia prevention also is the calm approach. And so I've spoken about this before over the years through North Carolina. If you have a copy of the presentation sent to you afterwards, which I totally recommend reaching out and getting a copy of this. This slide will also have in my notes how to contact Rick Smith of Contingency Consulting if you want more information. But he's invented the CALM approach, CALM. And so it's got 4 basic principles that serve as essential tools for today's progressive law enforcement agency. So it includes communication, the things that we talked about here, communication, active physical control maneuvers, different things that you can do to help work with a person, to restrain them, but to do so carefully. So in that is the lateral recovery, restraint positioning, and then minimization concepts on top of that. So all right, so false arrests. All right, that includes unlawful search and seizure, claims of that, claims, okay, you busted in with no warrant, or you showed up with no warrant, you don't have a warrant to do what have you. Probable cause, where you're searching without a probable cause, and then somebody gets arrested for it. Any kind of vendetta bias that may be against somebody, or somebody may perceive that, which can also fall under the discrimination part as well. Supervision, poor supervision seems to be a running theme in these kinds of claims that we're seeing. So, all right. And then for civil rights, as this falls in that area as well. So things that we're seeing on these claims are medical and health needs not being met. Folks who say, all right, I've got this issue, and then it's not addressed, or a long period of time goes, between the time that they filled out the form and submitted it to when somebody actually gets back to them for their issue, or it's ignored, or and let's be honest here, detainees don't always forthcome with all of their information about their health at the time of intake on the medical intake forms. So they may have things going on that you had no way of knowing about, but now you're stuck with, the situation. They came in, they didn't tell you about it, and now all of a sudden, they're having heart issues, or there was medication that they needed that they didn't tell you they needed, and now they're having adverse effects or withdrawals from that, or suddenly they're just, they pass away. And then sexual assault, not having PREA in place. At minimum, you've got to have folks in there who are trained on this. And, there are many folks, many agencies who are challenging this, but the Prison Elimination Act is actually in effect for all agencies. So, there's a lot that goes into that where there needs to be communication between, for, to protect the detainees, as well as for your training for the staff on what to do, not to do, how to deal with specific situations, how to handle inspections for any kind of allegations that occur, how to protect people on both sides. Malicious prosecution is another thing. We get claims like that all the time. And then no use of verbal commands. Again, people not knowing what to do, so they're doing the wrong thing. And then next thing you know, they're being arrested for not complying when they weren't sure what they were supposed to be complying with. So, and those are a challenge when it comes to defending them as well. So,
Ashley,
yes.
I want to go back to that last topic,
Sure.
civil rights concerns. Are we seeing any kind of a trend in as far as an increase or in these types of claims leading to, I guess, court decisions? I mean, is there a trend in this? Because I'm hearing more about those.
Medical and health needs continues to be a high claim. And that in that, one wants to make sure that when you have your medical services for your facility contracted out, that you have, the hold harmless agreements in place, specifically who's going to do what, who's responsible for what, and your policies and procedures, how medical needs to be outlined as far as alerts from folks coming in, as well as folks who are already in the system to be able to indicate what they need, whether they're sick, whether they've got an issue, what have you. Those continue to rise. They are not inexpensive claims, hardly ever. I mean, you've got duty to defend on these, plus, dealing with the medical situation and whatever costs go along with that. So there's that. Sexual assault continues. It's not one of the highest that we've got, but it's definitely up there. Or there's the claims of of a rather sexual assault. We don't get as many of them, but we're seeing it with other entities and other insurance companies as well. So, but when it happens, it's not a pleasant thing to have to work with. Malicious prosecution, those continue to rise as well. So, that answer your question?
It did. Thank you.
Okay, great. So let's talk about vehicle pursuit. This is one of the hot buttons for underwriters across the country right now. When a pursuit goes sideways, it's it usually goes bad wrong. I didn't want to put a picture in here of anything that went in North Carolina in case, we had somebody on the call. But, this is one, I mean, you count the number of vehicles involved here and the number of property, the amount of property damage between all the vehicles involved. We've got infrastructure that's damaged. And then what it's going to take to straighten all that out. That's an expensive situation right there. So one of the things that that I've been dealing with our insureds and folks who are onboarding with us is, the underwriters want a real good look at that vehicle pursuit policy. Now, there's three types, as you well know. There's the least restrictive, where it's officer discretion, and then there's the next that is, with supervisory uh, direction and directives. And then there's, the most restrictive, which, is for exigent circumstances only, or they may have one or two things under that you can do, and they will consider that exigent. Underwriters like that the best because they don't want to see anything that allows for increasing vehicle pursuits. We've had entities where, cars are going, patrol cars are following somebody at 120 plus miles an hour through city streets. And, and what this also does is it puts a lot of stress on officers. But we're getting claims where even if they stop pursuing and turn their lights off and, sirens, somebody may still be fleeing and then end up running into a house. We've had those claims. So it's a lot to consider whether and how much you want to pursue, what your experience has been. And let's take a look at this a little more closely here. So South Carolina, the study came out of South Carolina, and there's an interesting correlation between auto liability for the vehicle pursuits as well as the workers' comp. So what they looked at is they said, wow, okay, vehicle pursuit claims and the related workers' comp claims were costing almost the same. So that may be something interesting to look at for, for your own loss runs to say, okay, well, is that something that you all are experiencing as well? If you're having a pursuit and there's a wreck, how's the medical for everybody, matching up and that claim for workers' comp, in addition to, people being struck and hit and their property damage for their vehicles or property that's surrounding that's fixed, property. So, and again, we just talked about the types of pursuit policies. So when you look at your pursuit policy, and I'm working on one of these right now, where okay, you want to look for plaintiff traps, where you're spelling things out to the extent of what if you skip something, in an investigation or something like that, or it was something done out of order. You don't want a plaintiff's attorney to try to hang their hat on that and prove negligence. So, we include what we need to include. We spell things out where, certain folks should be responsible for things. But we also want to make sure that we've got, careful wording as far as, the absolute wording, so that it does allow for officer discretion in some cases, as you go through, but we're also following what, the proper protocol set forth per the agency. And then another thing, when you're doing investigations, look at the reasons why an officer has pursued. And like when you do your mid-year and end of the year reviews of pursuits that have occurred, and there's all kinds of pursuits that are occurred, as we know. I mean, you've got high speed, you've got normal pursuits, but take a look at the reasons and see if it makes sense for what is being done and carried out, because sometimes it does not. Why, I mean, I can give you a whole bunch of, examples for that, but you already know them. And so, with that, you want to also examine that policy that you've got and make sure that it matches up with, your what you feel is reasonable for a pursuit to occur. And the word reasonable is beautiful in a defense, because it implies that you're doing everything you reasonably can. You're thinking about something as a reasonable person. You are supervising with reasonable thoughts. Um, and care for the community as well as for your staff itself, that you're trying to do the right things. You're trying to do everything you reasonably can do. And that is a very relatable word with judge and jury. So that's a good word to keep in your back pocket for when you're dealing with situations. So further under the auto liability aspect, deer strikes and speeding seem to be correlated as well. Deer strikes occur, of course, we know in the most rural of areas, but what we're finding is that the faster a car is going, you know, you, deer strikes are more and more common. They don't have time to get out of the way, or they're frozen in their steps as they're crossing, what have you. So there's things that can be done about that as well. Um, Distraction is the next biggest area, right behind that. Between all the computer screens that we've got going on, radios, directives coming through, cell phone. We're looking for things. I mean, it's no simple thing. There's a lot going on in that vehicle at that time, and there could be a rapidly evolving situation going on top of it. So just depending on what the situation is. So what are the cures for this? Excuse me. So defensive and distracted driver training is one of the best things that we can do. It helps remind folks of, okay, when we're making choices, as we're doing things, what makes sense? If something goes wrong, how do we want to defend it? It's simple, even as simple as, reaching down for a beverage. We become distracted as soon as we realize we're thirsty. That is a distraction. And then, the follow through. And then we've got to make sure that our beverage ends up back in the beverage holder and not on the floor. So, that's a very simple distraction, and we're human, all of us. And that's an issue for every single person behind a vehicle who opts to drink a beverage, have a beverage in the car. But it's, stuff like that, we talk about during driver training. But we can even get into, the more mechanical aspects of what officers are having to do while driving, different things like even backing up into parking spaces. So when you come out and you're trying to respond to a call, you're not trying to get everything put away in your car, get everything turned and all of that, and backing up at the same time, and trying to respond to a call. If you are already backed in, you can already see everything on the landscape in front of you. Whereas if you have to put everything in your car and then back up, the whole landscape may have changed behind you. We have more claims from officers backing up into each other in their own parking lot just because of this one issue. And now what happens? You've got two officers who can't respond to two situations, to two calls, because we've got damage, maybe a disabled vehicle, what have you, or even maybe, okay, we'll sort that out later, but it still causes a delay in response. So, that's a challenge. So there's things that we can do to make it easier for officers and also help lower the cost of claims and reduce the number of accidents, which will certainly help auto liability policies. For distracted driver, it's a behavior-based issue, and this is not just a county problem, a city problem. It's a national issue for everybody, regardless of whether it might be a distracted driver that an officer ends up encountering on the street, and somebody ends up running into your officer's vehicle. So there's a lot at play here. So that's something else is making sure that we're doing annual driving reviews and having good criteria in place to weigh what's good, what's bad. North Carolina has a really nice feature with the DOT where, anything happens, an alert comes through. And I think it's a very nominal fee. It's something like $10 a year, something like that to do that. And again, disciplinary action, nobody likes it, but it's not okay to have accidents, and it's not okay to have wrecks. And we've got to deal with that accordingly, but also carefully, because again, we want to make sure that we retain our staff, but that we're also doing what we can. If we have a lot of accidents, it also affects, the way an officer feels about themselves, the way other people feel about that person. It can affect workplace culture. So, and then accountability comes into play there as well. So, what are we doing about these kinds of things? Are we doing anything at all? And having those serious yet honest conversations. What can we do better? And certainly, getting feedback, doing task force if that's what's needed, for everybody to sit there and talk about, okay, what are we doing? How can we do this better? How can we step up? Because supervision and accountability is honestly what we're seeing as the root cause of a lot of these claims that are occurring. And if we've got, because I've always said, especially when I go into a jail, good management makes all the difference, even if you're dealing with a bad jail. And it's old. It doesn't have air conditioning. It doesn't have, I've seen just about all. And but I've also seen where a bad situation is just as bad as it gets. But management comes in and they check on everybody. They make people feel good who are locked up and so what do you need? How do we do this? And even though these people could file civil rights claims, they're not because of the way they're being treated. And the whole fair is fair. They're doing everything they can. They're miserable too. So that's something to consider along this. Okay, how are we? Are we giving supervisors enough support? Are they getting enough top management support? Is there anything they need that they're not getting? Are they getting enough training? Many times we promote somebody, but are they getting, all of the training tools that they need to have? And are they getting it as often as they need to in order to have refresher training? If we're bringing somebody in from, external, who doesn't know our culture, are we making sure that they are trained with everything they need to know and getting that for them as quickly as possible? And performance appraisals, all right, nobody likes doing them, let's be honest, but they are really important. We also have to think about, okay, we're doing these with, legal, this is a legal document that we're creating. We don't want to do an appraisal and have, okay, yep, they're fine. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, we've got to terminate somebody for things that we should have been documenting in this performance appraisal. And we've also got to be careful with what we're saying. We can't write things like, well, Johnny is a good Christian family man. We've got to be very careful, and check in with HR, have peer review on these with HR, make sure that these are appropriate. And we also have to remember that these are also, public documents. So, and then checking in with employees, supervisors, checking in with folks. I mean, that is one of the best things that we can do. When my boss checks in on me, hey, it's not only, hey, are you doing everything right, but also how are you doing? And because, let's face it, law enforcement is anything but easy. Even on the best days, you're dealing with a lot of stuff. It takes quite a toll. So we'll talk about that coming up toward the end of the seminar, what can be done. But yeah, documentation and all of these things. If we have a conversation that strikes a chord, go, oh, yeah, we want to check back with this person on a certain date. You can stick that in your calendar, or have a note somewhere to just circle back and check in with somebody, make sure they're doing okay. And so often we are so quick to say, hey, you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right, we're not doing XYZ. Why aren't we doing XYZ? But also, what's equally as important is, finding good things that somebody is doing. And what that does is that positively reinforces, those choices that they're making, that behavior that they're doing that you want to see over and over. And when we're having to admonish somebody or mete out discipline, it's like, okay, well, let's give them a few things that they're doing right before we launch into the rest of it. Because I think that helps the message be received more positively, and more productively. Another thing to do is to be reviewing body and dash cam footage on a regular basis. Also, if you have your own buildings, what's going on in your lockups. This is the best way to also see, all right, since you can't be everywhere at the same time, what's going on out there? Because this is also one of the ways that, that lawyers are going to say, okay, well, they'll want to use it either as a defense for you, or you'll have the plaintiff's attorney wanting to use it against you. So it's good to know. And the last thing you want to have happen is to be on a stand and say, okay, well, have you ever reviewed, the webcam footage, body cam footage, rather, and have somebody up there and say, well, no, we just don't get around to doing that because we're so busy. You've got to make time for it and do it on a routine basis and document somewhere that you've done it. Because if you don't document it, it didn't happen. So as we move from the cameras, that's about data storage as well. Okay, so yes, we absolutely want to keep doing the footage reviews of all of these things. We want to also make sure that we have good IT and personnel consultings and teams in place. We may have limited talent, especially for smaller towns, or areas where you just, folks aren't there. You've got a limited talent pool. Then absolutely what you can do is bring in a consulting team to help, or, farm it out to somebody to help support your IT people. And this happens all the time, but it's not just enough to have, because I'll get, yeah, we have great IT people. They install our computers. They do this, that. They keep our software up to date. But guess what? There's a lot of more to this, especially when you come to data storage. Backup is huge. You want to have at least two kinds of backup, on site and the cloud. And you also want it to be encrypted and immutable. That's a key word there, immutable, which makes it less tamperable. So somebody can't go in there and delete something out, change it. And especially now with AI, so much can be done with that. We don't even know what all can be done at this point. It's just, somebody that has a lot of time and talent, they can really change things up. So that's something to be aware of there. And testing backups is critical. Frequently, what does that mean? Weekly, at least, to make sure that the backup systems are working. If anything goes sideways, you absolutely want to be able to go back and say, all right, what happened? And look at it from different views if you've got different abilities for that, so you can get different perspectives on, what went down. All right, was this, by the book? Did we have problems? How do we deal with this if it ends up having to go a disciplinary route? But and also preventing spoliation. Judges do not look kindly on spoliation. They look at it as negligence. And what is spoliation? Spoliation is when your data, it disappears, your videos disappear, or they're damaged. So, they look at that as absolute negligence, and your case will not go well for you if that happens. So that's something that you want to make sure is absolutely stringent. So, I can't stress that enough. And the next thing is maintaining your systems. My husband is in high-end data storage. I hear about this every day. Even, giant telecommunications companies, that we use every day are not maintaining their systems properly. And I hear about it every day. So I can only imagine with the limited resources, in public entities, it's not happening, and I'm not seeing it happen. And that's a real problem, because guess what? When it goes down, your whole system can go down, and it can take forever to come back up. And it's expensive. So that's a whole thing to address with your data, your IT teams and your consulting teams, to make sure that your systems are maintained to the absolute best you can, because those are the kinds of things that help save your bacon. Next, storage retention schedules. How long do we want to keep our data? Data storage is expensive. I'm not going to lie, it is. But okay, what do we want to keep? How long do we want to keep it? You've got to look at these because what I see a lot of times is, all right, well, we keep things only if there's an incident, and we keep it for maybe 30 days or 90 days or maybe a year. And is that enough? Oh, no, because guess what? Attorneys love to wait and provide, if they're going to serve you notice of a lawsuit, they like to wait until a few days before, that statute of limitations runs out. They're hoping that you have gotten rid of any evidence of defense that you could possibly have. So, a good rule of thumb there is statute of limitations plus 1 to 2 years, because even though, you may have kept it for statute of limitations and that comes in, you want to be able to still have access to that data to exonerate yourself in that amount of time. And not only do you want to think about keeping where incidents have occurred, but also, the amount of time where nothing did occur. So somebody could make an allegation and say, well, X, Y, and Z occurred. And you could go back and pull up the footage and for the date, time that they're saying, and there's no evidence of that. So that's another, aspect of things to consider as well. So moving right along, other elements for success here. So yeah, training coordinators, your guru, making sure that all of these things, your schedules are in place. We want to exceed state requirements. We never want to have minimum or even close to minimum. We want to, and there's so much to be trained on. If we're doing it right, it will all be there. And having the good documentation, because documentation is our friend when it comes to defense. And have trainer training within the department where, it's not just one trainer, but several people who are able to do the training and they can help each other throughout the department on this, providing instructor certification. That's great because that also beefs up the quality of staff that you have. And there's all kinds of resources out there. So we have Trident University with Lexipol online training, and we offer that complimentary to our insureds. Now, there may be other resources that you may have that are like that with some of your other providers. So, take a look and check into that. Even if you don't get a CEU credit for these kind of things, it's the repeated exposure to the stuff. And these folks keep this stuff up to date. That's part of what they do, and make sure that it's refreshed, that it's, it's not going to be the same thing all the time, that they change it up. So, it's great to be able to take advantage of this kind of stuff. And officers can go in at any point if they want to take additional training and do so at no additional expense to you all. So, and then, all right, this is a deep topic that we could spend all day on. So what I've done instead is give you a handout with things that you can take a look at. One of the elements for this: training, equipment, and our policies for response. Those are all big ones. Thinking about our department culture and leadership, so that, people aren't standing there waiting for, instruction to come. It's already set. Everybody knows what they're going to do when they get on a scene. And again, going back and doing assessments. Okay, are we ready? Is everything working? Checking and making sure that, we're doing drills and so forth. And then also, if something does happen, how do we want to handle this in the media? Do we have a PR person in place, a PIO to handle this, and to have everybody refer to that person? You don't even have to know who that person is. That, if the media wants to speak with somebody, it's their job to figure out who that is and say, you need to talk to our PIO. They could even call, the front desk at your agency and find out, okay, well, who's the PIO for that? What's their phone number? So officers don't necessarily have to remember all of that information. They could just say, you need to talk to our PIO for that if they receive the request. The next part is, how we want to handle social media. There should be an SOP on social media, what officers can and can't put on social media. Frankly, the strongest social media policies in place are definitely recommended to keep, certain things from ending up on there. And especially, it also helps protect your staff because, people like to find out where people work these days. And then if something is said on media, and somebody doesn't like it out in the community, they can dock somebody and really make, your officer's life difficult, and that for your department as well. So those are some things to consider there. So in the handout that you have, there's some articles there that will be, great for an update for what's going on. Also, I've given you two studies on this. The Nashville PD Covenant School Response, that they did an A+ job on that. So, it's always good to see what somebody does right, how they did it, what was the end result, and to be able to witness that. And we all know what happened with Uvalde. It didn't go well. So what I've got here is the Robb Elementary interim report. There was a committee that was charged by the state of Texas to go in and take a look at this and come up with recommendations for what needs to be put in place for changing this agency. But we can also look at this and learn from it. Okay, are we using these things in our agency? Have we put this stuff in place? What do we need to do? What makes sense for us and for our operation? It's 80 something pages. That's a lot to absorb. So what I would suggest is there's a lot of it you can skim through till you get down to the parts that are going to be of more interest. So you've got links and all kinds of stuff in this handout that you can click on for that. And but they're also recommending 16 hours of training every 2 years for this. And as we know, active, shooter incidents are increasing in this country right now. The number is just, staggering. It's every day somewhere, sometimes multiple times a day, which increases the likelihood of it happening in our own backyards. So it's definitely something that I know stays a constant concern with agencies. So, but I wanted to provide some updated information so folks can take a look at it and, with considerations for your own department. So, and finally, and very important is wellness. Burnout and stress is so huge right now across the country for everybody. Everybody, not just law enforcement. So what do we do about this? There's some different things. We can create a quiet room where somebody can just go in. There can be, a fan in there for just, noise cancellation, or a wave machine. You can dim the lights. Have a fridge in there with ice waters. Somebody may never go in to use it, but it's nice to know that somebody cared enough to put that in place. Communication with folks, again, between supervisors or between each other, checking on each other. You're doing okay, especially if somebody's had a really rough day of it, something went down, and checking, maybe make calls after hours, a text or something like that, just to check on somebody. These things can really mean a lot and help reduce stress. Or it may be that moment where somebody's finally back home and they can sit, and they're reflecting, or, even maybe there's many folks who, they drive home and they sit in their vehicle for a little while before going back into the house, enjoying family, so that they can just, loose off for a minute and decompress and try to shake the day off as best they can before joining family. This is a really, really hard job, really hard job. So, we want to teach skills and tips for stress management. We've got EAP. We, remind people I was just speaking with somebody the other day. He'd used it 4 times already this year, and there's no shame in it. There is, it's what it's there for. Taking time off and vacation as you need it. We say all of these things, but, as supervisors, as top management, but, we have to also allow for it. We can't say, oh, we want you to take vacation, but yet keep plugging somebody in so they never get time off to decompress. So with that, and positive measures for morale boosting across the department, anything that we can think of, whether it could be anything from food related to, a campaign, or, something that helps people and boost the morale and the culture in your department is so important. Things that we can do for everybody's health and well-being and providing support. So with that, I want to thank you all so incredibly much for your time. And are there any questions or comments?
I don't see any questions right now. And for everyone listening, we'll be sending this out. This was recorded, and we'll be sending this to everyone after the webinar's over. It'll probably take maybe a week or two for it to be sent out, but it'll be in your inbox here pretty soon. Tony, do you have any remarks?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Ashley for your expertise and your help with this, and we appreciate you taking the time to share this with us and each of our participants today, and we just really appreciate you.
It's been my pleasure. It's an honor to serve those who serve our communities. It's so important to take care of everybody, and I appreciate being able to do so. So I'm always available. I've got my contact information here for anybody who needs me. You don't have to be insured. I'm here for you.
Awesome. Well, thanks,
Thanks
Ashley.
very
Thanks
much. All
for
right.
yeah.
Y'all take care. Thank you.
Everybody have a good day. See ya.